So, what happened to all the different Chinese stocks yesterday? So earlier today, I've actually stitched a video regarding all the different interviews that CNBC actually made to people like Jim Cramer, and they have constantly been parading the idea that, hey, the CCP has finally fallen through. They have shown their true colors and they have the ability to change any single industry at their fingertips. I've also listed all the different bear arguments that they came up with, and I will definitely be addressing them one by one at the later part of the video. So before I start, I did create a Discord channel, so it's everything related to Alibaba. So for all you bulls and bears out there, you guys are all welcome to join this entire open community. I believe everybody right here is extremely friendly, and for those of you who want to put forth different arguments, you want to discuss, you want to dispute, or you want to even debate any certain kinds of issue, both in the US and China market, you are open to do so. I think everybody will be happy to listen to your viewpoint. So if you are interested, please click in the link in the description box down below to join the entire Discord server itself. On top of that, I've left my referral link for both Tiger and Moomoo brokers. They're essentially both a brokerage firm from China, and right now they're aggressively expanding in the entire world itself. So for those of you who are interested in getting an Apple share, I think the promotion runs till the first week of August. So for those of you who haven't get your free Apple share, what are you waiting for? If you would like more details regarding the entire promotion and referral rewards, please feel free to reach out to me on both the Discord server or just on the YouTube comment section down below. With that, let's get right into today's topic. But if you were to really just look at my China watch list right now, look at the amount of REITs that there are in this entire list itself. With those that are slightly affected in the 3 to 4% range, while those that are heavily affected in the 7-8% range. And do not be fooled by all these 1 to 2% drop, because all these are all the Hong Kong and China related stocks. And before the news was officially released from the China counterparts, all these have actually already halted trading. So if you were to really look at this entire situation itself, I believe most of you have known, it's this entire crackdown on EdTech companies. So what does EdTech means? It's education and technology companies. So if you were to look at those specific EdTech companies, look at New Oriental, it's down 40%. Look at TAL Education Group, it's down 70%. How insane is that? Look at the highs of it. It's at the highs of around 86 USD and now it's trading at 6. That's ridiculous, right? So this headline comes in at China bans off-campus tutoring in education overhaul that sets off market rout among dozens of listed EdTech platforms. So local authorities will ban holiday and weekend tutoring and will no longer approve tuition centers, according to the document from the State Council. And companies that operate EdTech platforms will not be allowed to raise capital through IPO. So let's look into this entire article in greater details. So China's government is cracking down on the country's booming off-campus tutoring industry in one of the biggest overhaul of the education sector that sent dozens of publicly listed stocks tumbling in Shanghai and Hong Kong. So the local authorities will ban the provision of holiday and weekend tutoring and will no longer approve the establishment of new tuition centers. Companies that operate EdTech platforms or services that provide online education will no longer be allowed to raise capital as well. So President Xi, he instructed the government to rein back on runaway investments in the education industry and promulgated a set of rules to ease the burden of homework and after-school training for primary and secondary school students. So last but not least, the official explanation by the State Council and by the Chinese Communist Party was that the motivation behind the government's move was to ease the burden for students, and also because many people are not willing to have children due to the high cost of raising children. So before I start answering all the questions or all the different bear arguments given by all the different analysts and all the different people spreading the entire fear-mongering climate on all the different Chinese stocks right now, I do have to admit a few facts. So let's go down the list. Number 1. So this entire education overhaul was not unexpected. There has been a lot of rumors surrounding all these different companies for quite some time because it has always been part of the priority list of the CCP in trying to encourage their population to give birth to more people and to push back the problem of an aging population. That's the first fact. Secondly, it's also true that because of this new regulation and this new move by the government, they essentially wiped out billions and billions dollars worth of equity in the entire stock market itself. And that is also a fact that I have to recognize. Thirdly, if you do not know about the entire education industry in China, or in particular any types of Asian country, I think you really just look at this entire incident as a joke. You might think that all the different students out there in different Asian countries are probably just coping very well, and there's always been the running meme that no matter how good you are, there's always an Asian better at you, right? So this is probably the entire narrative that the West has on all the different Asian countries and Asian population. So those are just the few facts that I have to lay out, and it's really just a disclaimer to this entire video itself. So now, speaking about it from a Singaporean's perspective, so just to let you have a deeper appreciation of the entire private tutoring industry in all the different Asian countries. So before I begin, remember to smash the like button for the entire YouTube algorithm itself. But really, the entire tuition industry in Singapore actually ballooned to 1.4 billion Sing dollars. And this was actually posted in 2019. And if you want to convert it to a common denominator, which is the USD, you can look at it as the entire tuition industry in Singapore being valued at around $1 billion in 2019. And now, let's take a look at how China is doing. Essentially in China, they generated a total annual revenue of around $393 billion yuan, which is $61.4 billion. This is in 2017. So if we were to really compare the two countries, which are both Asian countries mind you, in Singapore we have a 5 million population, but we spend $1 billion in our tuition industry in 2019. In China, they have a 1.4 billion population, and they spend $61.4 billion in 2017. So now let's just ignore the fact that they are in different years. Let's assume that they are in a common denominator and of a common year. 61.4 billion compared to $1 billion, that's a 60x difference. But yet at the same time, if you were to compare the population, Singapore is 280 times smaller than China. And yet at the same time, we are only 60 times smaller in terms of the entire private tutoring industry and the revenue generated. So just take the time to appreciate that actually in Singapore, I think the entire private tutoring industry and the entire private tutoring environment and the amount of pressure that we are putting forth on all of our future generations and our young kids nowadays, especially in the primary and secondary school, it's immense. Although I have already went through it, but I still recognize that it's a very big problem for Singapore, and especially in a lot of the Asian countries. Now, if we were to compare it to our Western counterparts, there isn't really a specific number, but if I were to really count backwards and see, the global private tutoring market in the US will grow by 8.37 billion, and this is said to be during 2021 to 2025, progressing at a CAGR of 8%. So if I just use a simple CAGR calculator, progressing at 8%, 2021 to 2025 is 5 years. And I just work backwards on what the initial sum is to work out a difference of 8.3 billion. Essentially just means that the current private tuition industry in the US is around $17.7 billion. And that is 2020 figures, by the way. So if we were to look at it, Singapore, 1 billion in 2019. China, 61 billion in 2017. In the US, 17.7 billion in 2020. So if we were to really look at the scale right now and we were to scale the comparison between US and China particularly, US has around 1/3 to 1/4 of China's population. But there is a very critical fact that we are not taking into account in this entire equation itself. US is a developed country. China is a developing country. You have to understand that actually, I wouldn't say majority, but there's a large part of the Chinese population is still living in the tier 3 to tier 6 cities. They are not developed. Their entire income, you look at the GDP per capita of all these different tier 3 to tier 6 cities, they're not doing very well. They haven't been able to enjoy the prosperity that all Americans, if not most Americans, managed to enjoy over the last 20 to 30 years. So if you were to really take that into account, I think in the entire environment of the private tutoring industry in China, is still of a much larger concern for the entire Communist Party in terms of the trajectory and how they are putting unnecessary pressure to their future generation. So just to bring you through what the Chinese media has been saying, and why did I claim in the starting part of the video that, hey, it's not really something that the CCP came together, have a meeting behind the closed chambers, and then came out and say that, hey, let's wipe out billions and billions of dollars in equity. So this was an article that was written actually 3 weeks ago. So you can see here is 3周前, so it's around 3 weeks ago. And I know, I've been saying that I know Chinese, so I haven't been showing my capabilities. So for those of you who do not understand Chinese, don't worry, I'll be translating along the way. For those of you who knows Chinese, please pardon my pronunciation because I technically wasn't brought up in a very China family. So my pronunciation might be a little bit off, but I guess I still recognize and I know how to read and I understand what they're essentially trying to say. So if you just look at the headlines that was posted 3 weeks ago, 中国限制课外补习以确保人人享有更公平的教育. What does it essentially mean? China is looking into banning private tuition to ensure that everyone has a fair access to education. So this is essentially just an article written by one of the media. And I have predicted that a lot of bearish people on China stock itself essentially say that all the different problems or all the different concerns that the Chinese Communist Party is putting forth right now are all excuses. They do not really care about their population, they do not care about their future generation. All they want to do is wipe out wealth and want the American investors to lose their money. So now let's just look at what the Ministry of Education of China has to say and what they have written out in order to appease the public and to tell them why they have decided to take on such an action. So please pardon me, I will try to translate along the way, and if you do not know anything, you can probably leave in the comment section down below as well. 教育部回应9月1日起，中小学迎来新政策，一周只放1天假？问号。So what they essentially mean is the MOE essentially responded, saying that from the 1st of September, so all the primary and secondary school students will welcome a new policy. So this was essentially published on 23rd of July, which was yesterday at 15:40, which is 3:40 p.m. So let's see what the Ministry of Education actually state. 对于现在的社会来说，学生也是一个压力很大的群体，因为他们的父母都期望他们的孩子成功，对他们的孩子有很大的期望。老师也希望他们的学生变得更好。So what they state was, in this day and age, actually the entire student population is experiencing immense amount of pressure from all sides and from all different stakeholders. Their parents are hopeful that if they send their child for education, they then will be able to attain a good result, land into a good school, and then land into a good job and not be worried about them anymore. On top of that, the teachers are also hopeful that they want to be better. 同时，对于家庭来说，如果他们想要他们的孩子变得更好，摆脱目前的命运或更好的发展，那么这对成就是非常重要的。Essentially speaking, for those of you who are extremely blessed in growing up in a developed country where you do not have to worry about all your food, you do not have to worry about losing your job and your retirement, etc. Now a lot of people in China, despite them rapidly developing the entire country itself, a huge part of their population are still stuck in the poverty cycle. And in order for them to break out of this poverty cycle, the only way up is through education, which is also why a lot of families have placed immense amount of pressure on their kids in order to ensure that they excel in their education system and ultimately excel in life, and to get out of this entire poverty cycle. 对于学生来说，他们中的大多数已经期待周六和周日，因为2天意味着放松，意味着玩得开心，意味着没有学习。但是等级越高，他们就越会发现这2天的变化。What they're trying to say is, in the entire student population, all the students are essentially looking forward to Saturdays and Sundays. Because in the weekends, it also implicitly means that they're able to relax, they're able to play, they're able to have fun, get away from studying and getting away from books. However, the older they get and the more into the education system they are, they realize that the meaning of weekends have changed and they no longer have the ability to have fun and relax. 而且很多家长也会在周六和周日为孩子安排各种各样的项目，这些项目大多数不是兴趣爱好，而是一些年级补习班。平常的课使得孩子们很累，但是现在如果你想要领先，你的成绩很重要，成绩和你的学位一样的重要。What they're trying to put forth in this paragraph is insinuating that a lot of parents are currently forcing a lot of their children or a lot of their child to go for additional tutoring and to go for additional classes. And this also means that the student has lesser time to rest, and ultimately, if you want to be ahead of your competition, you have to put in more amount of effort, and which also translate to this entire environment and this entire culture that's currently in China. 很多学校已经把他们的课程改为网络教学，然而它很方便。很多学生已经展示了这一点，他们较差的自制力和教师的控制能力，导致很多学生的成绩远不如以前。星期六可能是上课的一天，中小学生将来没有星期六。With this introduction of the pandemic to the entire world, a lot of all these different maneuvers has to be done. And one of the most important maneuver is in the education system, where essentially a lot of things is conducted via online, which is also why a lot of people have been claiming about Zoom University, where a lot of all these lectures and tutorials are done via Zoom or via an online platform. What they're trying to say here is, although they recognize the benefits of going online using an online medium, which is the convenience, which is also coupled with the fact that there are a lot of obstacles that come together with using an online medium. Examples would be the lack of concentration on the student's part and the lack of ability for the teachers to control the students. And in this case, this has also translated to a further deterioration in grades, and which is also why there has been a rumor floating around saying that Saturdays will also be converted into a school day. So it's no longer a 5-day school day, but it will be a 6-day school day in time to come because of this deterioration. 因为对于这个社会来说，结果代表一切，结果的质量决定了你将来会得到怎样的教育。每个父母都希望他们的孩子对成功有很高的期望。They are emphasizing the importance of results. And in this day and age, in any society, a lot of us are very results driven. So if the results are bad, you will have to pay for the consequences. 俗话说得好，祖国的花，青春是祖国的未来。所以国家一定会把小学生和中学生的政策放在第一位。The youth of China is the future of China. So what they are trying to reiterate is the fact that they will put their primary school and secondary school students at the first priority, and they will ensure that the policies put in place are prim and proper, and they will not do it in a haphazard way. 在中国，学生最常见的课外活动之一就是报名补习班，所以我们应该调整自己，但归根结底，每一个家长都要关注自己的孩子，关注孩子的表现，努力进步，也要关注自己孩子的心理，关注孩子的状态，健康成长。The entire ending of this note of the Ministry of Education was really to regroup and refocus and to tell all the different parents in China to ensure that they have to keep a close eye on their children, to monitor their progress, to monitor their effort, and to monitor their mental well-being as well, and to not just be so results focused. So I also really just wanted to point out a very important point before I address all the different bear arguments by all the Western mainstream media. So this is the Ministry of Education of the People's Republic of China. This is the official website of the Republic of China, and they did release this note on the 12th of July 2021. And the headline states that 教育部办公厅关于加强学生心理健康。So for those of you who do not understand, if I were to just use Google Translate, notice of the General Office of the Ministry of Education on strengthening the management of student mental health. And if you to really scroll through, it's a very extensive, I don't know, I've forgotten how many part. I think it's a 10-20 part. So it's essentially a 12-part process in ensuring that a lot of all these educators and people in the education arm of the government make sure that they have to implement and strengthen the management of student mental health well-being. Think about it, in all the major economies in Asian countries like Japan, Singapore, Korea, we have always been at the hallmark of success for education. And also look at the amount of suicidal rates and people having depression. I think it's a very real issue about student mental health, and China is really taking a very hard stance in ensuring that they do not go down the rabbit hole and to go through this entire pitfall that a lot of all these economies or all these so-called successful developed countries are actually currently undergoing. So I think generally you can synthesize it into 4 parts. Number 1, the Chinese government really want to scale down and tone down this entire private tutoring industry, and to ensure that the parents are not forcing unnecessary amount of pressure on their students. Number 2, to also encourage future parents or young parents to think about, hey, because this entire tutoring thing, and they do not have to be too worried about the expenses and the increase in living costs, so that they can encourage more people to have more children. Number 3, really keeping a lookout for the youth of China, because like they rightfully put, youth of any country is the future of that particular country. And last but not least, I think they really just wanted to break the entire private tutoring industry. You can look at it as a very toxic vicious cycle where they encourage more and more parents to force their children to go for more tuition because other people's children are also going for tuition. So this then perpetuates a very big problem, and also a lot of all these big investors in all these EdTech companies are usually foreign investors as well. So the ultimate question would then be, why are we allowing foreign investors to earn money and to force our own youths to go through this entire process itself, yet at the same time drive depression rates up, drive suicidal attempts up, and really perpetuate a very toxic culture? So looking at this entire incident itself, I have 2 main takeaways. Number 1, if your values and your vision is aligned with the CCP, I don't think you'll be doing very badly as an investor. Number 2, for those of you who are invested in borderline unethical companies, for example, online gambling, for example, drug companies. Maybe in the US, it's more liberal, the government do not really care about it, but I think at least in the China's perspective, there are a lot more regulations that's gonna come and penetrate into all these different industries. Now, to the last part of this video, about all the different bear arguments that were stated. Let me just very briefly address them and really just talk about it. Jim Cramer did talk about stripping wealth and taking the money and stealing wealth from the wealthy. Honestly speaking, do you think the Chinese Communist Party need to do that? If they really want to steal wealth from the wealthy, they wouldn't just target the EdTech industry. They would just invalidate the entire VIE structure. Like I said before in one of my videos, there are $2 trillion worth of equity in all the different VIE structures worldwide. If they really want to wipe out, they will wipe out the VIE first. EdTech, it's really a very small portion. Next, restricting foreign capital and punishing foreign investors. I think it has always been the mantra of CCP. They really just wanted to protect a lot of their industries that they deem as strategic importance. They're currently not all out trying to wage a war with all the different Western counterparts. I think it's a losing battle for both ends. They currently do not have any big catalysts for them to or encourage them to do something like that. So I really don't see this idea of punishing foreign investors. Next, resetting communism versus capitalism in China. Do you really think they're resetting their growth for the last 10-20 years in China? What's in it for them to reset their growth? So that the CCP can gain more control? Do you think they're not in control right now? What's there to gain back control when you're already controlling the entire country? The belief of focusing back to China. I think they have always started out in focusing in China, and they will be continuously focusing on China. The emphasis has never been on the international arena. They have always been focusing a lot on their domestic consumption, on their domestic uplifting, on their domestic GDP. Who cares about whether the US is doing well or not? So I don't believe that it's a decoupling. They have always been like that. Nothing has changed. Next, about describing this as a Tiananmen Square incident, that it's a widespread crackdown, sending a signal to be more inwards. Why not call it a capital riot movement? When President Trump erected all the protectionism measures, are you guys moving inward as well? Lastly, and the funniest part, in China, there's no iconic personality to expand to the entire world. What kind of iconic personality do you think China needs? Another Donald Trump? So do we need a Donald Trump of China? I think that will be quite interesting. Oh, there's one more thing that I wanted to add that I forgotten to mention during the filming of the video. I've never said running a government was easy. If it's easy, why am I not the Prime Minister of Singapore already? It's always a balancing act when you're introducing new policies into the entire system itself. How far, how strict, and how effective you want to be, it's really dependent on your different government philosophy. If you don't believe the Chinese Communist Party is looking out for its people, then I think the Chinese stock market, and Chinese stocks particularly, will not be suited for you. With that, remember to smash the like button. I'll definitely be here to stay. Don't worry, I will not run away even if Chinese stock market crashes. With that, I'll see you in the next video. But more importantly, I'll see you on the moon. Goodbye!